They broke you without ever raising a hand. They made you question your memory, your intuition, your worth. And from the outside, everything looked fine. You still smiled, but inside, you were fading. You're still wondering how it happened. Why you? Why you let it go on for so long? And more than anything, how to make sure it never happens again. You're not alone. Even the most powerful people in the world have fallen into this trap. And today, we're going to uncover why. Why you were put on the path of a narcissistic manipulator, what it reveals about your past, your deepest wounds, and how to turn that pain into unstoppable strength. If you're in this situation, or you've lived it before, hit the like button to show you're not alone. And if you feel like it, share your story, or simply drop a thank you in the comments. You think you're too smart to be manipulated, too aware, too experienced, too strong. So did Shakira. So did Princess Diana. So did Johnny Depp. High intelligence doesn't make you immune. It makes you more likely to rationalize abuse when it happens. Studies from the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships show that individuals with high empathy and emotional intelligence are statistically more vulnerable to narcissistic partners. Why? Because they overestimate their ability to help, to heal, to understand. Johnny Depp, one of the most recognized actors in the world, found himself entangled in a toxic relationship that unfolded in courtrooms and tabloids. Millions watched, but few understood the psychological web behind it. In 2020, over 41 million people in the US alone admitted to having experienced emotional abuse in a relationship, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Emotional abuse isn't rare, it's normalized, hidden behind jokes, passion, or twisted displays of love. Look at Marilyn Monroe. Behind the glamour and fame was a woman repeatedly drawn to controlling, emotionally distant men. Joe DiMaggio, Arthur Miller, geniuses in their fields but emotionally unavailable, sometimes cruel. Marilyn wasn't weak, she was wounded. And that's where the hook begins. The most common question is, why me? But that's the wrong question. The real question is, why do manipulators know how to find people like me? Narcissistic manipulators don't choose you randomly. They read you like a book. They sense the part of you that's still seeking approval, that inner child who's willing to sacrifice boundaries for belonging. They identify your silence, your over-explaining, your guilt reflex. According to Dr. Ramani Durvasula, a clinical psychologist and leading expert on narcissism, most narcissistic dynamics begin not with the narcissist's charm, but with your need to please. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to see it now. In a 2022 TEDx talk that went viral with over 10 million views, Jackson McKenzie, author of Psychopath Free, explains how narcissists operate on cycles of idealization, devaluation, and discard. These cycles are not accidental. They're behavioral algorithms. They test your limits. They reward you with just enough validation to keep you hungry, then pull away when you're most vulnerable. And the more intelligent or empathetic you are, the more you'll question yourself, not them. There's a brutal truth here. It can happen to anyone. Oprah Winfrey once admitted to being emotionally manipulated by a former partner. When she finally broke free, she said something powerful. It wasn't that he had the power. It was that I gave it away, piece by piece, every time I stayed silent. That silence is the real danger, because silence is where manipulation grows. In that space between your intuition whispering something's wrong and your mind making excuses for it. And it's not just in love. It happens in families, workplaces, friendships, toxic bosses who gaslight employees, parents who guilt-trip their children into submission, friends who use your secrets to control you. In every scenario, the pattern is the same. Love bombing, confusion, dependency, guilt, control. You're not weak because you got trapped. You're human. And being human means having emotional blind spots. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The trap you fell into is not a sentence, it's a mirror. You were targeted not because you are broken, but because you are valuable. Manipulators rarely chase people with nothing to offer. They chase those with warmth, loyalty, and depth. They need your light because they have none. So no, you're not alone. And no, this doesn't define you. What defines you is what you choose to do now. And it starts with understanding this. Even the strongest have fallen. But they didn't stay down. Now you won't either. Before moving on, leave a like and tell me in comments I understand better. Now let's get on with it. It wasn't random. It never is. When you look back at that moment, the beginning, something felt off, didn't it? But your mind rushed in with logic. They were charming, attentive. They listened. Maybe they even mirrored your soul. They seemed to understand you like no one ever had. But that wasn't empathy. That was calculation. Narcissists don't hunt randomly. They scan, they sense, they select. And what they look for is not weakness, but openness, emotional availability, generosity, self-doubt, hiding behind independence. They spot your unresolved pain before you even speak, because they've used the same tactics on dozens before you, sometimes hundreds. Why you? Because you were ready to give. A study by the University of Georgia found that individuals who score high on agreeableness are significantly more likely to be targeted by manipulative personalities. Not because they're foolish, but because they're hopeful. They want peace, not conflict. They want connection, not chaos. And that desire makes you override early warning signs. But there's something deeper: trauma bonds. If you grew up in a household where love was conditional, where attention was earned, not given, you're more likely to confuse inconsistency with intensity. The moment a manipulator starts that hot and cold cycle, your nervous system recognizes it, not as danger, but as home. That's the invisible link. Childhood trauma isn't just a shadow, it's a script. And until you read it, someone else will play it out for you. The most painful part is this: sometimes your greatest qualities, loyalty, patience, compassion, become the very weapons used against you. A narcissist will praise your strength only to later accuse you of being cold. They'll admire your independence only to later call you selfish. This emotional whiplash isn't accidental, it's design. Because once you start questioning your own identity, you're easier to control. Dr. Carol McBride, author of Will I Ever Be Free of You, explains that survivors of narcissistic abuse often share a trait called fierce empathy. It's not just empathy, it's the belief that love can fix anything. And that belief, while beautiful, is the trap. Because manipulators don't want healing, they want control. Why not someone else? Because someone else might have walked away, might have said no, might not have cared so deeply. You cared. That's your gift. And for a time, it became your prison. But here's the revelation. The pain you've experienced is not a reflection of who you are. It's a reflection of what you tolerated, hoping for change, hoping for the breakthrough moment, the apology, the proof that it wasn't all in your head, that you weren't foolish to love so hard. You weren't. The manipulation was real, but your reaction, the staying, the silence, the confusion, all of that came from a deeply human place. You just wanted to be seen, to be loved without conditions, to not be the one who always walks away first. In one of his letters, Seneca wrote, "You must live for yourself if you wish to live for others." That's the paradox of the Stoic path. You can't love purely unless you're anchored. You can't see clearly unless you first unblur the lens of your own wounds. Now you're beginning to see. You were chosen not because you were weak, but because you were open. You trusted, you gave, you loved. But now, you know. And knowing changes everything. You thought they were your opposite, but they were your reflection. Not in the way you feared, not in cruelty or control, but in pain. The manipulator found the cracks you were still hiding from yourself. They didn't create your wounds, they activated them. They mirrored what you still hadn't healed. That's the unbearable truth. And that's where your freedom begins. You felt unworthy. That's why you accepted crumbs as love. You felt invisible. That's why their attention felt like oxygen. You feared abandonment. That's why you stayed when your soul was screaming to run. The manipulator didn't just see you, they studied you. They learned your rhythm, your silence, your insecurities. They became the person you were aching for. At first. Then slowly, they twisted the script. And that's what makes this trauma so hard to escape. Because in the beginning, you believed they were healing you. This is not imagination. This is psychological design. According to a study published in Personality and Individual Differences, narcissists are more likely to use cognitive empathy, the ability to understand emotions without feeling them, to manipulate. They learn you, not to love you, but to use your hopes against you. Let that land. They mirrored your light to earn your trust, then used your darkness to break it. And every time they pulled away, you chased. Not them, but the version of yourself you felt when you were enough for them. That feeling of finally being loved the way you always wanted, that feeling became the drug. And they controlled the dose. This is the trauma loop, and you're not alone in it. Studies show that abuse victims return to their abuser an average of 7 times before breaking free. Not because they're weak, but because they're addicted to the fantasy of redemption, of closure, of justice. But here's what the Stoics knew, and what the manipulator never wants you to discover. Your freedom doesn't lie in understanding them. It lies in understanding yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." You see, the manipulator is not your enemy. They were your revealer, a living diagnostic of your deepest emotional fractures, the fear of being alone, the compulsion to overgive, the inability to set boundaries without guilt. They mirrored it all, and now you see it. You're not broken, you're waking up. This awakening is brutal because it forces you to revisit every moment you stayed silent when you should have screamed, every time you apologized just to keep peace, every night you cried quietly, hoping tomorrow they'd be kind again. But this is where it turns. Once you see the wound, you can no longer be fooled. Once you recognize the pattern, you begin to reclaim the script. And in that, there is power, real power. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means finally understanding why it did, and never needing it to happen again. You met a manipulator, yes, but what they really were was a mirror. And now, you're breaking the illusion. The fire wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to show you what still burns inside you. When you come out of a toxic relationship, you don't come out clean. You come out scorched, doubting your instincts, second-guessing your voice, wondering how someone could break you in silence, without a single visible bruise. And if you're not careful, that fire turns inward. You become your own judge, your own abuser, asking, why did I let this happen? Why didn't I leave sooner? But here's what the Stoics knew. Suffering isn't the enemy. Misunderstood suffering is. Epictetus, born a slave, tortured for years, later became one of the wisest philosophers of his time. He said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And in emotional abuse, the imagination becomes the battlefield. You replay conversations, trying to rewrite outcomes. You seek closure from someone who gains power by withholding it. You build stories, theories, justifications, anything to make sense of the chaos. And that's exactly what the manipulator wants, for you to get lost in the fire. But Stoicism cuts through the smoke. It doesn't tell you to escape pain. It teaches you to transform it. Pain, to a Stoic, is data. Every betrayal, every manipulation, every insult, it reveals what you value, what you fear, what you must strengthen. You thought the pain was about them. It's not. It's about the wound that let them in. The fire is revealing your thresholds, your patterns, your inner contracts, the silent deals you made with the world. If I'm good enough, they won't leave. Or, if I understand them better, they'll treat me better. But Stoicism offers you this radical shift. You are not responsible for how others treat you. You are responsible for how long you accept it. There's power in that, not guilt. Power. Ryan Holiday, in The Obstacle is the Way, explains that the greatest transformations often come through crisis, not comfort. That discomfort is the universe's most direct form of feedback. It's not punishing you. It's trying to show you something, over and over, until you finally look. This is your moment to look. The fire stripped away your illusions. It burned through your hopes, your projections, your fantasies of who they could be. And now, only the truth remains. The truth is, they never changed. You did. You became aware of your needs, your silence, your boundaries, your fears. The fire didn't kill you. It gave you vision. And now, everything you lost, your peace, your confidence, your trust, all of it can be rebuilt. But this time, not for someone else. For you. Seneca said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." You've been in training. Every tear, every night you couldn't sleep, every apology you gave to someone who didn't deserve it. It forged something in you. Something that can't be faked. Something no manipulator can ever take again. Clarity. This is the real lesson. The pain was the teacher. Stoicism is the lens. You didn't just walk through fire. You became it. There's a moment, after the fire, after the silence, after the 1,000 mental replays and the emotional hangovers, a moment when something clicks, when the pain doesn't disappear, but it reorganizes. When you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to create in me?" That moment is the shift. And once it begins, you can never go back. You start to see patterns instead of promises. You spot manipulation in its earliest whispers, the subtle guilt trip, the delayed reply meant to make you chase, the compliment wrapped in control. What used to hypnotize you now makes you alert. Not bitter, just awake. But here's the truth. Awakening hurts, because it means realizing that you were complicit in your silence, that your loyalty was misplaced, that you were feeding something toxic because you confused pain with purpose. And yet, this is your edge. This is where the transformation really begins. According to the University of Pittsburgh's resilience research, people who recover from emotional abuse and rebuild with intentional reflection show higher emotional intelligence and stronger boundary-setting skills than the average population. Yes, stronger than before, because post-trauma growth is real, it's measurable, and it starts when you stop waiting for closure from the person who broke you and start closing the door yourself. You stop asking if they loved you. You start asking why you needed them to. That's when the power returns, quietly. Not in rage, not in revenge, but in calm, in decisions, in silence that no longer hides pain, but peace. You begin to move differently. You no longer need to over-explain your boundaries. You simply live them. You no longer feel guilty for protecting your energy. You understand that saying no is not rejection, it's self-respect. The Stoics knew this long before us. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control, and that includes how others feel about your boundaries, your silence, your distance. You stop fighting to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. You rise, not with fireworks, but with a steady, unstoppable clarity. You rebuild your self-worth from actions, not approval. You start creating a life where emotional manipulation can't survive, because your truth is too clear, your values too grounded, your presence too self-owned. You start attracting different people, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You radiate something rare, someone who has suffered, seen the truth, and refused to be defined by it. And here's what no one tells you. That strength is contagious. When you rise, you silently give permission to others to rise too. Your story becomes a torch, Your journey becomes a map, and someone somewhere will hear your truth and feel less alone. That is how the chain breaks. You were not put on this path to be destroyed. You were placed here to remember who you are, to walk through fire, to stand in the ashes, and to say, never again. Not because you're angry, but because now you're awake. And the awakened don't fall, they build.